Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for the ASPI and ASPI Delhi dialogue on green hydrogen market opportunities. My name is Kate Logan. I'm Associate Director of Climate at the Asia Society Policy Institute. I'm very happy to have you all here with us today. I'm going to pass briefly in a moment to my colleague, Mr. Akshay Mathur, to give some welcoming remarks on behalf of ASPI Delhi. But first, just would like to kindly ask everyone to please turn your cell phones on silent. After that, we will go ahead and get started. So Akshay Mathur is the Senior Director of the local office of the Asia Society Policy Institute here in Delhi, where he's responsible for the Institute's policy mandate in India. His area of expertise is geoeconomics and specifically international financial architecture, global trading systems, global economic governance, and global digital governance. And he has advanced degrees in policy, business, and technology, specifically from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, as well as a MBA from Boston University's Questrom School of Business with a concentration in finance and business analysis. So with that, I'd like to pass to Akshay to provide some welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Good morning. That was a very nice introduction, Kate. Thank you. But my real job here actually is to welcome Kate because she's part of the Asia Society Policy Institute. I don't know how many of you are aware that Asia Society Policy Institute is really headquartered in the United States, but we have around 15 centers around the world. So Japan, Korea, Australia, Switzerland, Paris, and of course a few in the United States. So we are part of the Asia Society India office, and I'm leading the Asia Society Policy Institute here. Some of my colleagues are already here. I hope you get a chance to meet them. So it's my pleasure to actually to host Kate and have her here in India because she's part of our larger team that's working on climate with our colleagues that are spread around the world. So she's traveled here from Washington, D.C. And so, Kate, welcome. And really congratulations on pulling this report together. But it's also my great honor here to welcome Shri Abhay Bakre and actually also Arijit, because we're always very happy when we get government participation. But in this case, when we get somebody with knowledge, I understand that you're an electrical engineer. You spend so much time on green initiatives with the government of India, including with the railways, and also representing India in climate negotiations at the COP. So we're very happy to have you, and thanks for agreeing to do this. Meanwhile, I'm also very happy to welcome online Ali, as well as a recorded message from Vivek. Kate will explain a little bit better than me on what Ali's role is. He's the founder and research director with a company that does analytical work and has supported and has worked with Kate on this report. And of course, we're getting a recorded message from Mr. Vivek Pathak, who is with the IFC, but really is part of the UN High-Level Commission. It's really the advisory board. It's the body that has entrusted Kate and her team to do this work on net zero, as well as not just for India, but other countries as well. So with that, I'd like to also mention that we have Nishtha here, who is part of our climate team based in Delhi. So please, some of you know her, I know, and those of you don't, please make sure that you get a chance to say hello to her. My other colleagues are also here, so they'll be wearing a little Asia Society chain around their necks. So if you get a chance to see them, please do say hi. So with that, I'll hand it over back to you, Kate. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Akshay. So with that, I'd like to just give a brief background on the High-Level Policy Commission for Getting Asia to Net Zero, which is the body of the report that we're launching today. And then I'll turn to a message from one of our commission members, Vivek Pathak, after that. So just as quick background, the commission was launched in the spring of 2022 under the guidance of the former president of the Asia Society Policy Institute, Mr. Kevin Rudd, also the former Prime Minister of Australia, as well as the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, with the focus of urgently accelerating Asia's pathway to net zero emissions while also ensuring that the region can thrive and prosper through this transition. So the focus of the commission has basically been on commissioning research and analysis that helps to guide this pathway toward net zero, but in a way that also provides economic and social benefits and enables those risks to be managed properly throughout the transition. So previously, the commission had pursued research on net zero pathways, specifically in India, where we launched a report called Getting India to Net Zero in August 2022, as well, actually at the Indian International Center here, where we had Mr. Kevin Rudd and Mr. Ban Ki-moon help launch that report, and have also pursued similar reports on Indonesia, as well as the Asia Pacific region more generally. In this most recent series of reports, of which today's launch is part, we have pursued more specific thematic research about topics, including climate finance, and in this case, specifically the role of business and market opportunities around net zero, and green hydrogen in particular as one of the key components of decarbonizing industry, which will be critical to getting the Asian region and India to net zero. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to a brief video message from Vivek Pathak, who is one of the members of the commission, currently serving as the Chief Regional Risk Officer at the International Finance Corporation, and formerly the Head of Climate Business at the IFC as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Vivek for his brief video remarks.
Much, esteemed colleagues, for giving me this opportunity to speak at this event. I think there's been a lot happening in the climate space over the past few years, and the time has come really for us to move very, very quickly on action. I think we've had plenty of reports on the impact of climate coming out, and I think India has been really doing a fantastic job in moving ahead in a number of these areas. I would just want to say that we really need to focus on the transition, because the next 15 to 20 years is really going to determine whether or not one gets to net zero. So it's the next 10, 15 years, I think, that are going to be absolutely critical. This is all the more important in a country like India today, because there's a lot of new capacity coming on stream as the economy is growing. And we need to make sure that as and when this new capacity in the industrial sector comes on stream, they're using the best available technologies and are being constructed in a way that their emissions intensity is going to be a lot lower and they're going to be a lot more efficient. And preparing for a world one day when you may have carbon taxes coming in, as we've already seen happening in the EU. So it's not only about getting more efficient, it's also making sure that we're fit for purpose to be in a position to export competitively over time. With the rising middle class, I think a number of areas come to mind, because the middle class is going to have a lot of demands. They want to have a better life, and I think we need to be ready and cater to that. So one area that I think is going to continue to grow rapidly is real estate. Real estate, I think there is enough technologies and ways that we can make it green. But we also need to focus, I think, on the existing stock of real estate and how do we retrofit that to make it green. Because we're going to have demand on housing, on commercial real estate, on the whole entire gamut here. And going further from real estate, now when we look at the supply chains for real estate, we need to focus on construction materials like steel and cement that are amongst the largest emitters today in any country in the world. So how do we focus on steel and cement? And I'll come to that in a minute. Energy efficiency, I think, is low-hanging fruit and particularly important when it comes to SMEs. And SMEs are a large chunk of any economy, so we really need to focus on the SMEs. And energy efficiency is, I think, something that India has done quite well on. But I really think and I hope that we can really deepen the penetration of energy efficiencies when it comes to SMEs. The third area is the entire agricultural supply chain, or what we call agribusiness, right from farm to fork. And there it's critical for India because India still relies heavily on the monsoon. So how do we have better water management? How do we have better logistics? Because a large part of primary agricultural produce is lost because of poor logistics today. So this number I'm told was close to 30%. Yeah. And also about new farming techniques and when it comes to water management, things like drip irrigation. So like India really was a leader, and we had the green revolution in India many decades ago. I think India is well positioned to have what I would call the green agricultural revolution, and really take agriculture to the next level in a decarbonized manner. Very important to focus on climate risks, because the impact of that is going to be immense. And how do you protect against rising sea levels, flooding, droughts, I think is going to be critical. And that's going to require a lot of outlay and a huge business opportunity over time. Coming to green hydrogen, I think in all fairness, there's been a lot of hype around green hydrogen. It's not going to be the silver bullet, let's be honest, that is going to solve the climate crisis, but it's going to play a huge role. One thing I would like to say is, as of today, we need to look at the entire value chain of green hydrogen. So right from where do we get the solar panels and the cells for the solar panels? How do we get the electrolyzers at a competitive price? And last but not least, how do we get the water? Because water is critical to green hydrogen. So a lot of work I know is going on in this space, and I hope it continues, and we will have solutions. But what is going to be imperative is that we manage to reduce costs. Today, green hydrogen is relatively expensive, but it's also given us the ability to transport electrons across waters without having to build expensive subsea cables. I think areas where green hydrogen can take off very quickly in the medium term are focusing on hard-to-abate sectors, which I talked about earlier, like steel and cement, and fertilizers. Green ammonia is quite commonplace, is getting more and more commonplace now. So I would say starting with that and then going on to further users is probably the best way to do it. We also need to be mindful that green hydrogen requires a lot of renewable energy. And at some point in time, trade-offs will have to be made. Is the renewable energy best to produce green hydrogen, or should it just be fed into the grid in a country like India, where renewable energy is done really well, but still has a long way to go? So with that, I wish you all the very best, and a big thank you to ASPI for inviting me. And I look forward to hopefully connecting with you all over time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, esteemed colleagues, for giving me this opportunity to speak at this event. I think there's been a lot.
I think we just need to wait for the video to pause playing again. Just give it 1 minute. Is it possible to pause the video recording? There you go. Great. Vivek's message was so great that I know we could have heard it one more time, but so really appreciate those words, I think, from Vivek that have put us sort of in the right mode to focus on today's topic, which is specifically on green hydrogen, and especially the market opportunities around green hydrogen in Asia as part of this report that looks at the 4 largest economies of China, India, Korea, and Japan, and then specifically bringing that into the Indian context where those opportunities are particularly salient. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ali Hasanbeigi, and just a bit of background about Ali first. He is the founder, CEO, and research director of Global Efficiency Intelligence, and also the key modeler, author, and analyst on the report that's coming out today. So the one really driving the research that was commissioned by the high-level commission for this particular report. So as a bit of background, Global Efficiency Intelligence, and Ali, he has over 15 years of international experience, especially on specific topics, including industrial decarbonization, energy systems efficiency, and industrial electrification. And Dr. Hasanbeigi is also the founder and co-director of the Industrial Electrification Center, which is a premier information hub dedicated to pioneering the transition toward a decarbonized industrial sector through the electrification of heating processes. And before he founded Global Efficiency Intelligence, Dr. Hasanbeigi was a research scientist in the Energy Analysis and Environmental Impacts Division at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where he led the Low Emissions and Efficient Industry Research Group, during which he worked with various public, private, and nonprofit organizations globally. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Hasanbeigi, who will be joining us virtually for a presentation and overview of the report and its key findings. So with that, we will turn it over to Zoom and Dr. Hasanbeigi.
Thank you, Kate, for the introduction. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'd like to thank Asia Society for inviting me and having this opportunity to speak at this event. As mentioned, I'm Ali Hasanbeigi with Global Efficiency Intelligence. We are a consulting firm based in the US, doing work on industrial decarbonization across different industries and across different countries. In case you're wondering, currently I'm in Asia. That's why I'm able to work at this particular time. Otherwise, it would be difficult with the US time zone. Let me share my screen. I have a few slides to share with you today. I think I have about 10 minutes to present very briefly what we have done. Hopefully, I can manage that. So, can you see my screen in full screen mode?
Yep, it looks great.
Great. So, so the topic of today is hydrogen, green hydrogen, and particularly the report actually is focusing on a particular angle, which is the green hydrogen electrolyzer market opportunity. Those of you who are familiar with our work, I see some familiar faces in the room. We do a lot of work, analytical work on industrial decarbonization, roadmap, focusing on CO2 emission reduction and those aspects of industrial decarbonization. This one was focused on green hydrogen, but specifically, what's the electrolyzer market potential? So governments, investors, and other stakeholders, they want to see what's the potential out there when we are talking about this green hydrogen. So we investigated that, but also we didn't get into this so-called hydrogen hype. We selected a few critical applications of green hydrogen and which can be easily justified, and we focus on those. And I'm going to talk more about that. The report is published, so you can find more detail there. I think Kate already mentioned Global Efficiency Intelligence is a company. We also have two platforms, Industrial Electrification Center, fairly related to what we are discussing today. A lot of application of green hydrogen out there that are being pitched, especially in industry sector, do not make sense. Actually, most of them are much better off with direct electrification of heating in industry. I should say that up front. And also, we have another platform called Textile Sustainability Hub. It's not related to today's discussion, but in India, textile industry is very important. In case you have interest, we have a lot of material on that website on how to decarbonize textile industry. So, as I mentioned, the goal of this study was to focus on green hydrogen electrolyzers, and particularly for 4 Asian countries, the manufacturing giants, as we all know, China, India, South Korea, and Japan. And as I mentioned, we focus on 3 particular industries and applications. So all the analysis I'm presenting today are only for producing green hydrogen to supply green hydrogen for hydrogen, direct reduced iron or H2DRI steelmaking, green ammonia production, and green methanol production. So all other applications of green hydrogens that are either legitimate or not legitimate out there, we haven't focused on that. So this market potential is only for these. So the broader market potential, for example, for all the hydrogen needed in the refinery, chemical sector is much greater. So that's an important note I want to make. Also, to make projections up to 2050, of course, who knows the future, right? So we developed several scenarios from BAU with conservative assumption all the way to net zero scenario. The net zero scenario, we took the net zero target of each of these countries, 2050 for Japan and Korea, 2060 for China, 2070 for India. And based on that trajectory, we kind of made an assumption in terms of the adoption of green hydrogen in these sectors, and as a consequence, what's the market potential for electrolyzers. Again, some of the applications of new application of ammonia and methanol, for example, for a maritime fuel or hydrogen carrier, we did not include those. So all the applications of ammonia and methanol that we consider are the current application. For example, ammonia for fertilizer production. So future new applications are fairly uncertain, highly questioned. So we did not speculate and we did not include those potential growth area. So this is a high-level snapshot of our basically results. So we are finding a massive electrolyzer market potential in these 4 countries for these 3 particular industrial applications. In total, under the what we call a declared net zero scenario, which is a more aggressive scenario, we are quantifying more than $180 billion market potential by 2050. And in the interim, also market potential is significant. I will show you. The largest market potential is in China, $85 billion in 2050, under net zero scenario again, and closely followed by India, to no surprise. And then we have Japan and Korea. And among the industries, the larger market potential is in the steel industry, particularly for green hydrogen DRI steelmaking. We are not using hydrogen for injection into blast furnace. All the hydrogen we allocate in the green hydrogen DRI steelmaking. And then, of course, for green ammonia production for fertilizer and other application, and green methanol production. So this is a snapshot, but we have done detailed country level and sector level analysis. You're going to find very detailed information in the report, but I'll show you very few slides as an example. So for the sector-specific electrolyzer market potential, let's look at the steel industry. As you all know, steel industry is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases among all industries, account for almost over 11% of global CO2 emissions. And these countries we actually address, China, India, and Japan, the top three steel-producing country. South Korea also a large one, ranks 6. Unlike the other three countries, China, Japan, and Korea, all the projection shows that their steel production is going to go down by 2050. On the other hand, as we all know, India is going to significantly grow because the country is growing. And a lot of projections, they show that the steel production might grow by around 4 times by 2050 compared to 2020 level. So the graph here shows the green hydrogen DRI steel production that we are projecting up to 2050 under different scenarios, BAU, advanced, and net zero. I know it's a lot to unpack, but again, we are having this event in India. So let's talk about India. So for the net zero scenario, we are assuming that the green hydrogen DRI steel production will increase to 125 million tons by 2050. And to give you a sense, that accounts for only 25% of total steel production in 2050. So whether you consider that aggressive or not aggressive, so we are saying 2050, 25% will be green hydrogen DRI. And that is the most aggressive scenario. Of course, under BAU and advanced, we have assumed lower penetration of this technology. But having this assumption for India and other ones in terms of adoption of green hydrogen DRI steelmaking, we quantified how much hydrogen we need, how much electrolyzers we need, and we had assumptions on the electrolyzer cost. We did project actually significant drop in electrolyzer cost, by the way, over time. As you know, a lot of projections show a significant drop. But having that said, we quantified what's this electrolyzer market potential. So these graphs are showing in $1 billion, what's the electrolyzer market potential to supply green hydrogen for H2DRI steelmaking. So as you can see, again, let's pick India. We are basically projecting the market potential is going to be around $2 billion in 2030, so very moderate on the net zero scenario. But it can grow up to $42 billion in 2050. That's a significant growth for India. That is to support that 125 million ton of green hydrogen DRI steelmaking in 2050 under the most aggressive scenario. When we talk about China, the growth, the amount of growth is kind of slower, and also the overall market potential is lower. That is because all the projections are showing China has peaked. The steel production will go significantly down. But more importantly, in 2050, around 50 to 60% of overall production of steel in China will be scrap-based DRI. So the share of primary steelmaking will be significantly lower. Therefore, the share of H2 DRI steelmaking will not be as large as what we are projecting for India in terms of total amount. We have done this similar sector-specific detailed analysis for green ammonia production and green methanol production. But for the interest of time, I'm not going to present those. Please look at the report. So then we kind of combine these sectors, the 3 sectors, and for each country, we showed what's the overall potential, again, to supply green hydrogen only for these 3 sectors. And these are the examples for China and India. Under these 3 different scenarios, we are showing how much is the total electrolyzer market potential to supply green hydrogen to these 3 sectors. You can see, again, in India, we are predicting almost $80 billion by 2050 under the net zero scenario. But even if you look at the advanced scenario, which is more conservative, we are talking about $40 billion by 2050 and over $10 billion by 2040. So these are significantly large market potential for this so-called green technologies or green tech in the market. So given this massive potential that is out there, I think policymakers, investment can make certain decision in terms of developing the domestic technology and having industrial policies to tap into this potential. That was one of the key reasons we did this study. So putting all together the overall electrolyzer market potential for these three industrial applications for these 4 countries are shown here. So again, just for these 3 applications and just for these 4 countries, you see this massive, we are talking about like hundreds of billions of dollars market potential. So knowing that whoever capitalizes this, develop the market, can basically gain substantially. At the moment, China is at the forefront. They have a huge capacity and they produce electrolyzer, fairly high quality electrolyzer with fairly low cost, 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost compared to European electrolyzer or American electrolyzer. So for a country like India, where you have a lot of low cost resources, you can compete probably much easier with the Chinese manufacturer than the Americans or European. And my understanding from the research is that Indian government, rightly so, have policies in place to develop the local electrolyzer manufacturing capacity, which I think is very smart, just looking at these numbers. So even if we say the net zero scenarios are aggressive, which if you look at the number in the report, they are not actually as aggressive, they are fairly reasonable. But even if you look at advanced scenario, we are looking at like a massive market potential in the order of like 12 billion in 2030 and 93 billion in 2050. And again, this is just looking at these. And if you expand to other application and other country more like global, then we are talking about the order of magnitude, probably higher potential. And countries like Japan and Korea, they're significantly looking outward because their domestic market is not as small, but most of the market is outside. So they're having policies in place, trying to dominate the international market with this technology. So again, talking about India, probably that's somewhere you want to look. Don't try to read this, just put it here to say in the report, we have an entire chapter where we are talking about manufacturing capabilities of green hydrogen and green hydrogen electrolyzers in these 4 countries. We look at the policies, we look at some of the advantages and disadvantages, and some of the opportunities that are there in each of these countries. So if you're interested to see what we have listed for India and how it compares to other 3 major countries, I would say look at that chapter. Again, for the interest of time, I'll move forward. We conclude the report by a chapter on recommendations, how we can accelerate the development of technology and adoption of technology to produce more green hydrogen, but also have the capacity for electrolyzer manufacturing, both for domestic and also export market. So we categorize our recommendation for policymakers, for the industry, for the investors, and think tanks. So a range of recommendation and the objective of those are listed there. From government developing, guidelines, financial incentive, R&D, workforce development, capacity building, all the way to, investors, what they need to do in terms of where they should perhaps put the initial projects and kind of ramp up over time. So we have listed all those. Again, for the interest of time, I don't get into the detail of that. Overall, this report intended from beginning to be very short, concise, and precise with limited scope, but justifiable scope to quantify the electrolyzer market for the good uses of green hydrogen. The best use of green hydrogen is where already hydrogen is being used, which is gray and black, ammonia and methanol industry. And for any new cases, most of those new cases or new uses are being pitched need to be significantly scrutinized. But as we all know, a steel industry, which is very highly polluting, has this new emerging technology, which is green hydrogen DRI. And it's very justifiable to use green hydrogen there as well to get to net zero. And with that, I would like to conclude. Again, more information, more detail in the report posted on our website and also AGS Society website. I encourage you to have a look. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. Kate, back to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ali, and also thank you so much for your leadership on being the lead author of this report as well. I'd like to turn now to Akshay to provide a quick introduction to our keynote speaker.
I think I've already done, so maybe you can start. Sorry, I switched the order, but yeah.
So thank you, Kat. Thank you, Akshay, for my brief introduction. It's indeed pleasure to be here in this ASPI event for launch of green hydrogen report on decarbonizing Asia's industrial giant. I appreciate the inputs and talk given by Mr. Vivek Pathak and also by Dr. Ali. Mr. Pathak very rightly mentioned about the key aspects of the industry decarbonization and also the benefits of low-hanging fruits like energy efficiency. And we are the organization bureau who is leading the India's efforts on energy efficiency. Mr. Pathak also mentioned about the opportunities in absorbing the green hydrogen industry side. As highlighted by Dr. Ali, India is going to have a huge potential in the next 2 decades or even beyond when we talk about 2047 as an energy independence and beyond that our net zero goal by 2070. But before that, let's see where do we really stand. In the past decade itself, post-Paris Agreement, there have been a lot of efforts in terms of rolling out policies, huge programs, especially in the India's energy sector, both from the supply side and demand side. On the supply side, the advantage of having renewables at a large scale, and that's what we are keep on multiplying from 10,000 to 175,000 and now 500 gigawatt. That's what we are aiming for by the end of this decade. This transformation in the power sector and the policies or the reforms to actually facilitate the electricity as a much more reliable, easy to consume and easy to manage kind of energy source is actually gaining importance in the demand side. I'll come to the importance of industry decarbonization and especially the role of green hydrogen here. So when we talk about industry decarbonization, for India, it offers huge opportunity because it is already mentioned in the report. And even if you see many sectors, not only the steel or the DRI or cement or other parts of ammonia, etc., almost all sectors are having 80 to 100% expansion within this decade. That's by end of 2030. 2 to 3 times expansion or sometimes even 4x as mentioned in the steel side by 2040 or 2047 and even beyond that. Now all these technologies or the expansions on the demand side is happening in a gradual way and they don't want to have a technology lock-in because most of this technology, once they are installed in next 3 to 5 years, will be there for another 2 to 2.5 decades. But at the same time, whatever energy transition scenario is happening within India or even across the world, the best of the technologies being presented in the entire domain are now available for consideration by these industries. So when these industries are actually aiming for their decarbonization, and that's why the decarbonization offers them a much more opportunity rather than a burden or rather than a kind of a difficult proposition, because they are actually expanding and their expansion is going to be multifold. So whatever technologies they are going to imbibe, they are going to save it a huge cost in the future, both in terms of their input energy and of course in terms of the reducing the emissions. So with these, if we talk about the main sectors like steel or cement, etc., the decarbonization starts with other options or alternatives than the electrification route. In a classical way, the electrification is the most appropriate transition pathway, because when we switch to a particular kind of fossil fuel, whether it's coal, oil, or gas, coal for industry, oil and gas for industry or transport, etc. Managing electricity, improving efficiency through electrical based equipment, etc., is much more easier. They are much more manageable, and they can offer a much simpler way to improve efficiency and reduce cost against the similar options of fossil fuel. So when we talk about electrification in India, and that's the biggest lever or strategy we can say for India's decarbonization. Today we stand at 21% at the consuming or the demand side, and we aim to increase it because the developed countries have already reached something 34 to 38% because of their energy mix, because of their economic segregation of different sectors. But even for the manufacturing sector in India, there are options available to use electricity. So whenever there is a possibility of switching to electricity, whether it's industry or transport, we are already going. So e-mobility is one way. Electrification of entire rail system is already there. And now if you talk about the other options left, which are like if it's transport like inland waterways or shipping, the green ammonia could be a better route, because on the industry side, wherever possible, if the electrification is getting increased or enhanced, both in the auxiliaries or processes. So green hydrogen actually offers an indirect way of electrification, at least for a country like India, where the electrification has a huge benefits. The green hydrogen comes up not only with the advantage of reducing emissions. So that's the premium. The premium lies because of the green hydrogen and a difference between the emissions between the gray and the other forms of hydrogen versus the green hydrogen. But the better option is that by switching to green hydrogen, all these sectors who are otherwise very difficult, and we always call it with a typical name, hard to abate sector, hard to abate in terms of reducing emission. But if we see difficult sector to electrify, because electrification or the grid is getting already green, as I mentioned initially. So green hydrogen, a country like India, offers a indirect pathway for electrifying our economy, especially those sectors which otherwise difficult to electrify through direct route. So in this regard, I think the options which are already being discussed, one category is there where the hydrogen is being used in some or other form, but produced by conventional sources, whether it's a gray or brown, whatever we call it. Those areas we can straightway consider for mix. The mix can happen gradually, and more the mix will happen, the demand will increase and the cost will come down. So that will have a gradual shift to that. But at the same time, there are other options available. As I mentioned, the options will not be limited to the current use of hydrogen use. The options could be the current use of other forms of fossil fuel, like whether it's gas, natural gas, or even kind of a coal pulverized coal. Although it is mentioned that the report does not cover the blending in the blast furnace. But there are many more areas where the blending can start. A few examples or few pilots are already there. But this blending can actually offer a larger opportunity, because it will set us how we can proceed further, how much quantity, how much in terms of volume, etc. we can increase. So this is one other opportunity, apart from where the hydrogen is already being used on the demand sector. The third opportunity lies, how can we straightway switch from the conventional fuels to the hydrogen. And of course, hydrogen means we can try with the green hydrogen, where otherwise we are not using any such kind of. And that technologies are also coming up very soon. It may take a few years, 5 years, 6 years, maybe another 10 years to most of these technologies coming at the commercial stage. One of them is already DRI we are talking, because it's a straight feasibility in terms of technical parameters. But I believe there are many more sectors in the demand side where the green hydrogen option can come. The last thing which I wanted to mention is that the entire green hydrogen economy, as I mentioned, is beneficial because of the electrification pathway in an indirect manner. But the demand creation and more sectors, the more and more avenues, whether they are in the form of replacing certain percentage of the existing system, or in the form of a blending, or in the form of identifying new areas, including transport, etc., heavy-duty transport or any other kind of transport, or maybe the appropriate option of converting green hydrogen into green ammonia or methanol and using them as a demand side fuel. So all these options will keep on increasing the demand in a much faster way than what we are estimating. My estimation is that whatever trajectory we are currently estimating, maybe after 2 or 3 years, most of this trajectory will be upward, what we are estimating, because more revenues will happen. And once the demand starts driving the supply, I think the supply side will immediately respond by making more and more competitive offer in terms of cost. So I believe this is going to happen in next 5 years, 10 years, and it will actually have a good opportunity for our industry to decarbonize. Having green hydrogen is one of the feasible sources, and we will definitely see a good impact after a decade. Exactly the way we saw the impact of solar energy 10 years back, we were talking almost at the same stage. And today we are at an entirely different stage of using solar and other forms of renewable. So I believe this report will actually have a good insight about and the inputs on how this entire ecosystem is going to move and the market progression. I'm hopeful that you will continue to work with BEE in not only reducing the emissions on the industry side, but at the same time improving the efficiency and allowing more and more options such as green hydrogen on the demand side. Thank you once again for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bakre, for your very insightful and visionary remarks about the way that India is approaching the green hydrogen sector and the opportunities that it brings. We really appreciate you being here with us today and joining us for the report launch. So with that, okay. Great. Thank you very much again. So, yep, we'll take a 2-minute break and then we will launch into the panel discussion.
Thank you.
So I'd like to just start by briefly introducing our distinguished panelists who we have joining us here today, and thank them for providing their insights on green hydrogen and specifically also some of their reactions to the report as well. So with me, we have, first of all, Deepak Yadav, who's the program lead with the Industrial Sustainability Team at the Council for Energy, Environment and Water, also known as CEEW. At the council, his work involves developing a roadmap for hard to decarbonize industrial sectors, especially engaging with industry partners on carbon mitigation strategies and supporting policymaking with insightful analysis. In addition, we also have Mr. Sujit Kumar Jena from the G20 Sherpa Office, where he's a policy specialist. In his current role, he provides technical and policy inputs to the G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant. He leads the policy discussion and technical insights to G20 members and supports relevant line ministries for energy transition, climate finance, and digital economy. He also played a critical role in the G20 Leaders Declaration in 2023 under India's presidency. And then finally, we also have Mr. Charith? Charith Konda from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, IEEFA, where he works on issues related to clean mobility, newer clean energy technologies, and the overall energy transition challenges of the Indian economy. Mr. Konda has over 17 years of professional work experience in public policy advisory, consulting, and business and policy research in a wide range of global firms. So I'd like to start by asking our panelists just to quickly provide some overall reactions to the report launch, and especially sort of bringing it into your own topical area of research and focus. So Mr. Yadav, if you could please start by providing some of your thoughts and insights.
Thank you, Kate. So on the report, right, one very important aspect that Ali sort of touched upon is the role of green hydrogen in the steel sector. And if I remember correctly, he mentioned 125 million ton of hydrogen-based DRI production and the corresponding amount of hydrogen requirement. Right. So if you look at the steel sector, the biggest challenge is again the cost of hydrogen itself. $1 going to $1.5 a kg. That is, what is needed to sort of for hydrogen-based route to become commercially viable. And then there are estimates on the amount of capex required, $3 billion per MTPA, compared to $1 billion per MTPA for the coal-based route, etc. So yes, in the future, especially when for net zero India, we don't need refineries actually, right? So refineries will exist till 2060, 2050, 2060. But a bulk of the hydrogen demand in long term is going to come from the steel sector itself, and that is what the report also rightly points out. In terms of methanol, yes, methanol is not a big sector as far as hydrogen consumption in India is concerned, but methanol is considered as the mother of all chemicals and fuels. So if we're talking about, let's say, net zero petrochemical plant, so methanol will be needed to be produced because that's how you can produce olefins, etc. And then I think fertilizers, of course, although there has not been significant growth in the fertilizer sector, but the Indian population is expected to increase, and so is the demand for fertilizer sector also going to increase. Now, typically, if you look at India, and this is my final reflection on the comment. If you look at India, 5 million ton of green hydrogen by 2030, the electrolyzer capacity requirement is around 35 to 40 gigawatts, at least 35 to 40 gigawatts. Under certain circumstances, it can also increase beyond that value, which is a significant number because today in India we have half a gigawatt per year manufacturing capacity, and the PLI schemes, etc. are here. Hopefully, we'll have multiple gigawatt scale electrolyzer manufacturing capacity, but there's a significant distance to go as far as electrolyzer manufacturing in India is concerned.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now turn to Mr. Jena for his remarks as well.
Hi. I guess it's a good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations, ASPI Policy Institute, for the report, and Kate for drafting the report, and thank you for calling me here. Going back to the report, I can always say that what I really liked about that you have been very concise and specific about the Asia angle. We have spoken about the 4 countries when we talk about South Korea, China, India, and Japan. And because of the economies and the population advantage, you can always see that the countries like China and India will be leading the front. But I always say that with a pinch of salt, there's a long way to go. So what we have seen in the G20 presidency also, we talk about green hydrogen a lot, but then the green hydrogen submission and the commitment from the countries like India is at a more ambitious scale when you compare it to other countries. And when you compare it to other countries, you always see that they talk about different colors of hydrogen, whether it's gray hydrogen, black, pink, blue, you get all the colors, and then you start confusing what are the various forms of the hydrogen. So in my view, there is a need to be a very clear understanding what you want to define as a hydrogen and a green hydrogen. There needs to be clear understanding on the standardization of hydrogen. Also, like Deepak has touched about what is the demand which is going to be there, 10 MMTPA, and we have a 5 MMTPA under the PLI scheme. But at the same time, we also have to see with the IRA Act into place, what ASPI Policy Institute, I believe, which needs to come together in the next few years, is that like you have given a report on Asia, you need to start looking into the different parts of the world, what they are doing. In a different volumes, you can always say what is happening in the Latin America and Africa as a country or a continent with specific countries, because going forward, you see that Indonesia has got into the presidency in 2022, India has been into 23, we have Brazil, the 3 emerging market economies, and then South Africa coming to play in 24, 25. And the 26 is going to be again USA. So I believe the next 3 years, you can always see what's happening on the G20 front in the presidency for the countries and what they have been achieving and getting into play. And at the same time, what has been the vision. Now, America, when I say has got the direct into place, then you see the kind of subsidies and the incentives, direct, indirect, they're going to provide to everyone to set up and manufacture. Then all the other countries in the globe becomes smaller in size. So irrespective of our $2.5 billion incentive, when you compare US, it goes to $1 trillion. And suddenly you see a total shift from Europe, Middle East, Asia to America for the shift for the production. So I believe the supply chain is going to play a critical role, and I don't expect, and I hope that then the same way the semiconductors become an issue in future, you don't see all the sunrise sectors of growth becoming an issue. So that's something I believe we have to work together and see what can be done. At the same time, there's a need for demand and supply, but we have to also understand that mandating industry to go to a green hydrogen is not the right move. You always have to nudge the industries because they have the more economic and business model to look forward to. And as a policymakers, we have to see what we can ensure that the ecosystem develops. So in my view, these are the few factors which you have to think of. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And then finally, Mr. Konda, for your thoughts as well.
Thank you, Kate, and thanks to the organizers for having me here. So I have a brief comment on the report. So when I first saw the report, it was, I mean, it's a positive report, and it kind of zeroes down green hydrogen potential to a specific application. This is especially important because of the versatility of hydrogen as a fuel. It's quite multiple use, and this report kind of zeroed it down to the key potential in the 3 application areas that you looked at. And it's kind of very, and then assign a quantitative number to it. So it's kind of gives a very positive signal to the policymakers and investors alike when they're looking at such a large problem or a target of net zero. And it kinds of give a specific number and the potential, and it's quite encouraging that India grows when you're looking at the electrolyzer market at a CAGR of 16% till 2050. So that's quite encouraging and kinds of helps, as I said, both investors in putting their money as well as policymakers to draft the policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to build on Mr. Jena's remarks by having you speak a little bit to the role that India played in terms of bringing green hydrogen into its G20 presidency, and also going forward with this year's Brazil G20 presidency, sort of how you see that initiative on behalf of India moving forward within that group of the world's largest economies. And especially, I know you already touched on the importance of understanding not only what India is doing, but what other countries are doing. And if you could speak a little bit just to how the policies in different countries, especially these largest economies, might impact one another, and how the G20 might play a role in addressing that as well. Would be keen to hear your remarks.
Thank you for the question, Kate. I was not expecting, but yeah, let's delve into it. So, see, when India got the presidency and the Honorable Prime Minister spoke, how we have to ensure that our document or a leadership or the leader's declaration has to be more ambitious. So what we eventually did, that we eventually identified what are the various sectors and the themes we have to look forward to. Though we achieved the sheer scale and grandeur and the kind of a very ambitious declaration. And on the energy transition, when you see, we have achieved something which was not achieved in the past few presidencies. Also, with the 2020 COVID crisis, Russia-Ukraine anomalies coming into play, that was always difficult to bring all the countries into synergy and come into a common agreement. What we achieved was in the energy, I will be speaking specifically rather getting into the other climate subjects or something. I guess tripling of renewable energy has to be a major driving force going forward. When we talk about green hydrogen, we know that we are talking about renewables into place. Also, we have to understand where we are standing today. So you see, when you see, we are presently at 3.5 terawatt, and we are looking for a 10 terawatt of renewable energy by 2030. Also in that, if you see, the major countries who are going to dominate is China and USA. So whether you accept it or not, China is going to play a major role in the G20 presidencies or the countries, and is going to play a very important role going forward. So in the tripling of renewable, we also highlighted where India, being an emerging market economy, going to grow at the next 25 years, 30 years, achieving a net zero by 2017 and be energy independent by 2047. Still, you have to see that we are going to expect to be growth at 9% to 10%. And there's an opportunity also on the climate space, all the various subjects, and green hydrogen came into play there. But in the green hydrogen also, what happened was that a lot of the countries had a very different aspirations when they talk about hydrogen as a subject. Middle Eastern country will always be a gas dependent, and you know that they have a different transition and the needs to look forward to, and the business economies are totally dependent. Then a country like USA, which is going, if I say, I always see the developed world has done more climate deficiencies to the world than the emerging country like India, because we have achieved our SDG goals by 2022, 9 years back. But suddenly you expect a country like Africa to have a certain budget being allocated to all the sunrise sectors, focusing on climate subject, and then bringing hydrogen into play and expecting them to accept the green hydrogen is going to always be a difficult scenario, because they're still working on the renewable energy side first. So that's something I say that on the G20 presidency, what we achieved was the tripling of renewable energy, pushing for the green hydrogen, going for a green hydrogen ecosystem with focusing on India being the base and the center for the hub and spoke structure, and having a standardization into play. But also what has happened that parallelly you see IRA Act was enacted, and suddenly whole push was towards America. Suddenly you see all the European countries looking for the manufacturing base into America. Then Germany has been dependent on gas to a larger extent. And if you see, also I see that India as a percentage share of the GDP of the global world is still at a lower scale compared to US, Europe, and China. The US has been stabilizing at 24-25% globally in last 20-25 years. The share of Europe has come down from being 18% to whatever you say presently at 12 or 13. And China has increased from 3 to 15. Now India is going to be a 35 trillion economy we are expecting it by 2047, 2050. But at the same time, you have to understand green hydrogen will be one of the sunrise sector, not all the dynamic sector, which we want to focus on. In those sectors, we have to see what we can do on the production, consumption, finding the right financing instruments. Because you look at a production of 100 MMTPA, and then you say that we are going to be taking a 10% global share at 10 MMTPA and going for a 5 MMTPA as a PLI scheme and incentivizing the players into the game. But then you also have to understand on the supply side, we are still not able to break even from a $2 target which we want to, and we are still hovering around at 4.5 to 6 in between. So how you can do that? You don't have the right financing instruments into play. The banks or the lenders or the developers are not coming together. So that's where I believe you need to identify the right structure, what can be done on the policy and the space in general. And you have to also nudge them saying that, okay, this is something we are looking forward to. Also, you have to develop the right ecosystem on the supply chain. When you talk about the electrolyzers, like Deepak said, what is going to be the demand, and a 16% CAGR looks great on the paper, but what the countries are doing and the companies are doing. From few megawatts to suddenly going for a 5 gigawatt on annual demand, do we have the right supply chain and infrastructure and the demand into play to do that? So these are the intricacies I believe the country has to look forward. And yeah, looking forward what can be done.
Thank you. Really appreciate your perspective. And I think particularly some of your points around the ways that different countries see hydrogen as particularly important in terms of prioritization and ensuring that both the supply side and the demand side can be managed in a way that's beneficial to all countries, but also meets the fastest and most economical decarbonization pathway at the same time, and avoids lock-in as well. I think that was one of the key points that was brought up by Mr. Bakre's remarks as well. I'd like to turn now to Deepak, and your work specifically focuses on industrial decarbonization and the hard to abate sectors in particular. And given some of what we've heard already in terms of the projected expansion of industry and manufacturing in India, as compared especially to some of the other economies in the report, but also more broadly, how do you see so far in terms of the prioritization of green hydrogen for these industries, and particularly some of the progress so far and challenges to be managed going forward with regard to hard to abate industries?
Yeah. So if you look at various end use applications of hydrogen, and let's limit ourselves just to industrial sector, right? The cost at which green hydrogen will break even differs across various industries, right? So if you look at what are the low hanging fruits, the low hanging fruits are clearly non-urea fertilizers. DAP and OCF, etc., which are produced in India and also, which are imported from outside, right? So those are long-hanging fruits. Low-hanging fruits, will the break-even cost depends on which year you are talking about, but roughly, the lowest-hanging fruit starts at around $2 a kg price of green hydrogen, right? And these are non-urea fertilizers. After that, our refineries, for example, they typically lock into long-term, contracts for buying LNG, for example, right? And therefore they'll get LNG at slightly cheaper prices, and there the break-even prices again depends on year, but roughly around 1.6, 1.7 dollars a kg. That is the ballpark break-even price for refineries. Shipping sector, I think Mr. Bakre also talked about it, and I think Ali also sort of told that that is not covered in the report. But the thing about shipping sector in India is that our fossil fuels, they are very heavily taxed. And as a consequence of that, the green hydrogen break-even cost, which industries claim in the West, those don't apply to India. The break-even cost is significantly higher there. However, the quantum of fuel which can be used in India is significantly lower, right? So after that, then there are significant challenges. You look at 1.6, $1.7 a kg, non-urea fertilizers, all our imported ammonia, imported urea, imported non-urea fertilizers, shipping industry, etc. And then refineries, and then we start facing challenges because if you look at the next sort of opportunities which are unlocked, right? They get unlocked at very low prices. So urea fertilizers in India and the large consumers of hydrogen, but the cost break-even cost is significantly lower. It's around 1.2, 1.3 dollars a kg. So yes, you can consume large amount of hydrogen in urea fertilizers, but the break-even cost is lower. There are also certain other technical challenges, etc., which we can discuss in the roundtable. After that, if you look at steel sector, right? And steel sector with the technology mix today, blast furnaces, very little amount of hydrogen can be injected. So for example, Tata Steel, they have injected around 6 to 7 kgs of hydrogen per ton of hot metal. That is significant demand, so it's around 1 to 1.5 million ton if you look across India. But today, green hydrogen in steel industry is the most expensive decarbonization option. So I think Mr. Bakre also talked about it, that industries will look at something like energy efficiency, they will look at something like renewable energy before they even start thinking about green hydrogen. Although to capture the public attention, etc., they do something on green hydrogen in the steel industry, but that is very difficult. The transition in steel industry can happen through natural gas-based shaft furnaces, but in India we need natural gas at around $6 to $8 per MMBTU for industries to sort of start using it, and the delivered cost of LNG itself on Indian shores is around that value. It's even higher than that value. Therefore, there has not been much progress made when it comes to natural gas-based shaft furnaces in India, which is where hydrogen will sort of start breaking even. But again, the break-even cost will be around $1 a kg, right? So we have done assessment. Typically, if the green hydrogen cost reaches around $1 a kg, then based on today's volumes, and this is across all sectors, industrial sector, transport sector, etc., we can start using around 15 to 20 million tons of green hydrogen. So that is the market size, but it depends significantly on the volumes, and also below that again there are significant other opportunities. For example, if you look at olefin production using green hydrogen, it doesn't break even at $1 a kg. If hydrogen cost is at $1 a kg, then you need a CO2 price of around $120 to $150 a kg, so that your green petrochemical production processes actually become commercially viable. And then there are other CCU applications, for example, synthetic natural gas, etc. Again, you need a a carbon tax of around $150 to $200 per ton of CO2, even if your green hydrogen reaches a price of around $1 a kg. Again, this is slightly off topic, but mobility sector, if you look at trucks, for example, long distance, heavy duty trucks, etc., is what we claim are the best users of hydrogen. But there again, the break-even cost for hydrogen-based trucking, and this I'm talking about fuel cell-based trucking, not the hydrogen-based internal combustion engines, will be around $3 to $4 a kg at the tank inlet, right? And at the tank inlet, the cost of your refilling station itself is around $6 to $8 per kg. As of now, it can reduce to around $1.5 to $2 a kg, right? So there are significant challenges. There is significant opportunity for green hydrogen consumption in India, but those opportunities will be only unlocked if the cost of green hydrogen reduces, or if you have significantly higher carbon tax, which the European Union also doesn't have. So those are the challenges when it comes to sort of utilizing green hydrogen in the industrial sector and also other sectors like mobility applications.
Thanks for that. I think that was a super helpful and detailed breakdown of the role of cost and specifically what needs to happen in order to make green hydrogen actually viable for a lot of these different industries and across the different industries. And I also think that's a great segue to turn to Charith now, who's been doing recent analysis on India's green hydrogen mission and the early stage implementation of the mission, and particularly the site component of the mission. So I'd love to turn to you now just to brief us on some of the findings of the early stage implementation of the mission and some of your analysis.
Thanks, Kate. And yeah, it's a very good discussion here. So as you all know, for a country of India's size, we have moved quite quickly on the green hydrogen space last year. Started with announcement of the green hydrogen mission in January 2023. And very quickly moved to announcement of strategic interventions for green hydrogen transition, which is otherwise in short known as a SITE program, which kind of helped in giving programmatic support in kickstarting the green hydrogen industry. And of course, we are along with the world trying to move towards defining what is green hydrogen, and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy kind of given a basic definition in August 2023, and then announced even recently, very quickly, within 15 days, India has announced 3 pilots in steel, shipping and transportation in February, first 2 weeks. So we were moving quite quickly, and I think that's a fantastic achievement for India. Having said that, yeah, what is SITE it's primarily a kind of a program where capacity was auctioned out for both electrolyzers and green hydrogen production. And it gave 3 signals to the market. One is it helped in a way to discover the prices of hydrogen and electrolyzers. And it showed, secondly, what is the interest in the private sector and what kind of interest is there in the private sector. So I'm going to briefly touch on these points. So when you talk about electrolyzers, what is expected given the bid prices is it's expected to achieve a 7 to 10% reduction, given the average incentive of US $36 per kilowatt over the next 5 years in the Indian program. When it comes to hydrogen, again, the incentives are given for the first 3 years, but the project's lifetime is much longer. But given the incentive again there, the prices are expected to fall by 40% over the levelized cost of hydrogen over its lifetime. So that will be around $3 to $3.75 per kg, with all the incentives, not just the outright incentive, but given the transmission waivers, charges waivers on the interstate transmission system as well, and GST reduction as well. So that's on the prices. So when you move to like what was the interest received, that's also a good indicator of judging where the industry is heading. So electrolyzers auction capacity was 1500 megawatt, but the auctions received or the tenders received the bids received were double that amount of 3000 megawatt. So it shows the industry is quite interested in that. When it comes to even green hydrogen capacity, 450,000 metric tons per year was auctioned, and we have received somewhere around 551,000 tons per year. So that's 23% higher than the auction capacity. So this interest is as much high that already I'm hearing from my colleague at JMK Research, who helped us with this research, that they have already coming up with tranche 2 of auctions so quickly. And what kind of bidders, that's also important. When you see the renewable energy sector, how it grew. Initial years, we have seen some of bad actors entering the industry because we are moving so quickly. Some of the projects not getting commissioned on time, some squatters on the land. So meaning they just take the land and do not come up with projects. But having said that, at least the first tranche of auctions have seen, I think, serious players in the entering the segment, because we have seen bigger and companies which have current consumption of gray hydrogen, like companies like Reliance, Greenco, Acme. These are biggest players in renewable energy sector. When it comes to even electrolyzers, we have seen Reliance, John Cockrell, Jindal, and Adani. So some of the biggest names, not only in India, but globally, when it comes to clean energy sector. So what they were looking is to have an early mover advantage and also try to and see the potential on the export side of business. If not, the price is not entirely on the Indian side or break-even price for Indian market. So I think overall the side program is successful. As of now, we hope to see the projects on the ground very soon. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I think particularly notable to understand how the policy incentive from the government side then ties into actual implementation, and particularly your point about the bids being much bigger than expected. I'd like to turn now to the floor. We have a couple minutes left in case anyone here wants to raise any questions for any of our panelists. If not, I also have one other question, but happy to turn, if you could kindly just turn on your microphone.
Well, what about the concerns regarding the water? Because the water that is required for hydrogen electrolyzer needs to be, I mean, a lot more clean, a lot more, I mean, and in case of we use wastewater, or for that matter, seawater, it has to be, I mean, treated, and the, I mean, electrolyzer for that, which will require much more higher energy for that matter. So how can we bring efficiency for these electrolyzers regarding that? And my second question is regarding the efficiency of the electrolyzer itself, because I mean, they require a lot of, technical, I mean, know-how, and basically we are using these at the application level at this point of time. For example, in small industrial units, small, I mean, on very, very, I mean, on small scale, but when you are going to be using it on massive scale, so what can be the probability of reaching that and I mean, be able to bring some kind of innovations and some kind of, refinements in the process itself, so that the entire process can be, I mean, scaled up and the net zero goals can be met here. Thanks.
I can take both questions perhaps. So in terms of water, it's very simple math actually if you do, right? Even if you consider, taking seawater and then sort of, making into, going it through desalination, and then, you sort of convert that into DM water, right? Even if you do that, the cost increase is around 3 to 4% maximum 3 to 4% in terms of green hydrogen production cost. So, so that will not be a big impediment for green hydrogen. The other thing is, when we talk about green hydrogen, we talk about water, but when we talk about gray hydrogen, we don't talk about water, right? So if you look at the water intensity of gray hydrogen and green hydrogen, ballpark, they are the same. Well, I mean, green hydrogen is slightly higher, but ballpark, those values, are the same. Therefore, that, water argument, not working in favor of green hydrogen is something that I'm not, willing to buy. Also, if you look at, the India's, there are challenges on water availability in some parts of India, right? So we have done some research, and I can give you some numbers here. So if you look at, India's all wind solar hybrid, areas, these are areas where, low cost green hydrogen production will be commercially viable. We have a total hydrogen production potential in wind solar hybrid areas of around 80 million ton. So that is the wind, that is the green hydrogen production potential in India. Amongst these 80 million tons, there is about 56 million tons of green hydrogen production potential, where we have absolutely no water-related challenges. Absolutely no water-related challenges, and these are areas where you can produce green hydrogen without it sort of interfering with somebody's lives, right? In other areas, right, those excluding those 56 million tons, there are water-related challenges. For example, in some areas, you will have water availability only during monsoons. In some areas, Rajasthan, for example, you don't even have water underground, right? So those challenges exist in a few pockets of India, but broadly, water is not a big concern as far as green hydrogen production in India is concerned. So that was on your first question. The second question was related to electrolyzer efficiency, etc. I understand that is the biggest challenge, right? So the lower your efficiency or the higher renewable energy capacity you have to deploy, higher investments you need, the cost of your production is also significantly higher. So that is a valid concern. Typically, when you talk to industry today, they'll say around 50 to 55 units of electricity is what they need. If you consider some hydrogen losses, etc., that occur during the production process, they said then it exceeds 55 units of electricity per kg of hydrogen. However, when you talk to electrolyzer OEMs, etc., they claim in the next 4 years or so they'll be between 45 to 50. This is on a system level, not stack level. What energy consumption. So if you talk to, I'll not take names, but one US-based OEM, they'll say by 2027 we are targeting 48 kilowatt hour per kg of hydrogen. Today they are at around 53 kilowatt hour per kg of hydrogen, and there are many new upcoming technologies where the power consumption is significantly lower, right? And if you look at solid oxide electrolyzers, for example, the power consumption can be as low as 40 units, 35 to 40 units per kg of hydrogen, although you will need certain amount of thermal energy there, and then ballpark it becomes the same, but thermal energy is cheaper than actually electricity, right? So those improvements will happen. So far those improvements have not happened because there was no need from the consumer side, because yes, slightly higher SEC implies that there's slightly higher cost for electricity, but the demand was not so big for all the researchers to put their brain together. Now since there is a demand, those kind of research will happen, and then we'll sort of be close to the theoretical limit, hopefully.
Thank you for that. I think turn to
Yeah. Okay. I come from fertilizer sector, and I'll make just a brief comments on the report right now, rather than the scenario of the what can be done, what is projected here for for 30 to 2030 and 2040, we can definitely exceed that even in the zero emission scenario. For 2050, of course, we can definitely achieve under the advanced scenario, but it's anybody's guess right now whether we can do almost 25 million tons of green ammonia under the zero emission scenario. So that's something which right now, what DGB also referred to, we are at a trajectory right now, and which the report is consistent with that. In fact, I'm specifically mentioning for ammonia that, the slope is gradient is a little gradual right now, and it has to be reviewed 5 years down the line. Probably then it can become a little steeper as the technology as well as the cost. I'm not getting into the cost right now, but how it can be addressed to achieve these things for next 3 or 5 years, and how we can achieve this thing, we can probably elaborate later. But these are achievable things. There are issues, both, cost gap right now in green ammonia and gray ammonia, as well as some technological challenges. Not for first 3 to 5 million tons ammonia replacement, but further replacement, there are technological challenges as well. So we can, probably discuss that at some point later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We have time for maybe one more question.
Oh, thank you, Kate. So I'll keep my question brief. So I would say that we have spoken about lowering the cost of green hydrogen and also about demand mandates and demand aggregation and all of these sectors, and which sectors would be feasible, as we spoke about the steel sector, for where green hydrogen can go. Something that the industries are also keen on understanding and having more intervention from the policy side is lowering the cost of financing for these projects. These are long gestation projects. There could be risks involved, and also having a technology agnostic approach to long-term financing are some of the things that they want to look at. And of course, from the incentive sides, also hoping for longer period of incentives, because since these are again long-term projects looking at 10 to 15 years, so something that they hope for the government to also see is to have the PLIs and everything for a longer period of time. So those are just some comments and interventions that I had to make. Thank you.
I don't know if any of you want to respond to that with any thoughts on the finance piece.
I can partially answer it because I'm not 100% expert on finance. Yeah. But, if you look at the cost of green hydrogen itself, around, 50 to 70% of the cost is from the cost of renewable energy itself, right? And renewable energy market is like very well, developed. So, I don't know how much more we can do as far as the 70% cost component is concerned. But the biggest challenge is on de-risking of green hydrogen projects in India, especially in India, especially if you get electrolyzers from our neighboring countries, right? We don't know how those electrolyzers will perform. They'll sell you at $400, $500 a kilowatt. But they'll not give you any guarantees on the life, on the performance, etc. This is the same question I'd asked to Europeans, right? So I was in Germany last year. I asked one of the largest manufacturers of AEM electrolyzers whether you are willing to give guarantees on your life and performance of electrolyzers, and even Europeans are not willing to do that, by the way, right? So that is the biggest challenge, whether electrolyzers, is somebody willing to sort of guarantee the performance, etc. On the second question related to the cost of the benefits which have been given to green hydrogen, right? Let's be let's be very open-minded. Even the current benefits which are given, they are not significant enough to sort of bridge the gap between the cost of green hydrogen and at what prices they become commercially viable. And we know what is the money that has gone into that that subsidy, right? Around $2.5 billion is the total outlay. So that will not even if they increase the burden, it will not be significant enough for the green hydrogen to become cost competitive. What can be done is certain sectors like refineries, for example, you give whatever benefits government is doing, and any additional increase in the price of refinery products, for example petrol or diesel or other kind of fuels, it's very minuscule. And those price extra increase can be passed on to end consumers. Nobody will even notice that the price of my petrol has increased by 50 paise or 1 rupee a liter because somebody is using green hydrogen instead of gray hydrogen, right? So those kind of mechanisms can perhaps work rather than government sort of increasing their subsidy burden, etc. So that is my opinion. Maybe somebody can talk on finance.
Just sort of like an addendum to the question on the cost, on bridging the cost gap. How do you see the role of a carbon tax playing in, and could that actually significantly alter the pitch? And additionally, I mean, given that India is a growing market, how do you sort of leverage growth in demand to sort of work the cost in? Otherwise, you're just locking in choices, and then we're stuck. It's like a chicken and egg thing. So I'm wondering how to use these two instruments, project, I mean, the obvious growth that's there, and of course, carbon tax. Thanks.
I'll just answer to three things what you and asked, and then Charith can always take forward to the carbon tax. I guess that will be a good point of discussion. See, you have to understand your first question was regarding what is happening on the financing instruments. Basically, if you see any sector which is an infrastructure sector, the project financing comes into play. We also know as a country like India, last 10 years, how the project financing has came into play. You have not seen a lot of project financing happening because most of the projects don't get completed in due course of time during the construction period. And there is a lot of default over there, and the banks, if you all get all the bigger banks, SBI, HDFC, ICICI, they are more risk averse now, what they were. So then you go for creating an innovative structure, whether you're having a risk sharing instrument, whether you want to provide warranties, guarantees, and you have a PRI into place and everything. But then also you have to understand you have to bring down the cost of that finance also. If you're not able to bring out a weighted average cost of capital below 10 or 8 to 9, but can you bring that? That is a bigger question. Do we have the mandates for all the international organizations like World Bank or something? For example, I just give a brief. The World Bank always gives an incentive of only 1 to 10% to every amount of loan they sanction. So that's where, if you see, there was a triple agenda report of the World Bank where it spoke about how we can start creating direct and indirect structures, not the direct structures where you only give a loan and you're incentivized, rather than creating risk sharing instruments for all the sector. But at the same time, you have to also understand that those incentives, the instruments should be able to come to the back from the banks with the place of support from the DFIs and IOs to the developer. Industry or an organization like Reliance, who has a better sovereign rating, the government of India will be able to raise the market at a better rate. But then there are companies who are in the starting phase, they find it difficult to raise the money. Now you have to also identify, can we define the instruments with the right credit rating or an appraisal, but who will do that? Do you have a credit rating agency into play who can do that? I doubt. So coming back to that, so you know that there is what the cost is needed, but do you have the instrument? That's a bigger question. Can we bring the mandate for the IOs? Yes. But there will be a lot of nudging and pushing, and you have to see how the World Bank and other ADBs and AIBs are into play, and how we can push the local banks or the nationalized banks to do that. Coming back to the PLI, I always say that when the PLI was launched, it was a very clear mandate that we are not going to make it a lifetime incentive scheme or a structure. And that is a very clear understanding for the government and the Prime Minister as well, that you are going to incentivize on the sunrise sector for the first 5 years so that achieve the economies. You can't make a business out of a PLI. I can be very honest. Don't make a business out of a PLI, getting a subsidy, ensuring that, okay, I keep on pushing the subsidy, because there has been a lot of foul play happening here. That has happened in the electric mobility and battery energy storage also. I have been seeing that a lot of players, what they do, they become a part of the PLI scheme. They get all the support for the state, and then they default on the construction and everything. Then you cannot blame the state and the center, because you have to increase, and then you come back to state or center saying that please increase the time. No, we can't. We have given a certain allocation to the sectors to develop. We want to ensure going to provide the best support what can happen. But at the same time, we are not going to run it for the next 10, 20 years when we don't know how the demand and supply and the government is going to be. So yeah, PLI I look at as a 5-year scheme, very honestly. I don't, and the mandate has been in a similar sense. On the carbon tax, very honestly, very good question, but I don't think that emerging market economy should be pushed for a carbon tax. Rather, I would expect a carbon tax on a developed world better. Because if you see, when the per capita, I am able to meet my climate goals and everything, CFG emission, why there need to be a carbon tax there? And the carbon tax as a mandate has never helped the country. You can always nudge the people. You can't expect, okay, we are mandating this and you have to ensure this. That's never gonna work in that way. And yeah, Charith, if you want to take it.
Yeah, first on the financing part. So I think when I spoke with a few players who are in the market right now for green hydrogen production, so their concern is majorly not about the financing part, but who would offtake my hydrogen at this price, right? So one of the biggest missing pieces right now in the green hydrogen story in India is there's no demand directive, or there's no particular obligation on any entity to purchase green hydrogen. So if I produce at, say, most optimistically at $3, $4 a kg, who would buy it? And if you have a business case, finance would flow. I would say, the ideal way is go to get a project finance done, but project financing in India is still not very, you need balance sheet support or a promoter support still for majority of the infrastructure projects. When it comes to carbon tax, I agree with what Mr. Jena has said in terms of India already has a carbon tax. We do have on coal, and even fossil fuels like, even petroleum products are heavily taxed in a way. it's almost 50% of the pump prices are taxes. So that's quite high, and we do pay quite expensive when compared to other countries. So the difficulty in carbon tax is how arriving at a tax at an ideal rate and then transforming that benefit to somebody who is saving the carbon in terms of a carbon pricing mechanism, and then credit mechanism, developing a carbon credit mechanism and making it work efficiently. So I think that's a big challenge for BE is right now working on that, about 14 sectors or beyond that, but still that's a challenge.
And I'll just add quickly that ASPI is also working on the Indian domestic carbon market as well. Well, I don't want to stand between everyone and lunch. So I think it's time to wrap up. I just want to thank everyone for your active contributions to this discussion. We started off with remarks from Vivek Pathak, one of the members of the High Level Policy Commission, and also had keynote remarks from Shri Abhay Bakre, and really appreciated his inputs, as well as those from Dr. Hasanbeigi, the lead author of the analysis of the report, as well as our distinguished panelists who contributed their insights as well. So thank you all for joining, and want to invite everyone to join us for lunch on the terrace pergola, which my colleague Rahul will point out how to get there. So thank you all.